Anande Hari Hari Bol. The deepest gratitude to His Holiness Radhanath Swami, who is my life and soul, to all of his followers, of whom I am the servant, to all the devotees present here tonight, exalted God brothers. This Tirobhav, or disappearance of Srila Prabhupada, is something that is an ongoing realization for those who are dependent on the great teacher, the Acharya, the spiritual master. Really, when Srila Prabhupada left this world, I had no idea what it meant. It was hard to put into context. However, over the years, as the gravity of his leaving this world became manifest more and more, by him being conspicuous by his absence, and by the way in which we found ourselves, that is, we, the disciples who were left behind, looking for balance and a way to follow his instructions in a meaningful way. Srila Prabhupada speaks about this in the Srimad Bhagavatam, how when the spiritual master leaves this world, the disciple should cry. And also, the disciple should feel that he or she must dedicate his or her life to the order of the spiritual master in his absence in order to sustain life. After Srila Prabhupada left, I heard a story about a couple of God brothers who had been traveling in Malaysia with the library party. It was a party of devotees who would go to universities and libraries all over the world and place full sets of Srila Prabhupada's books. And Vaisesika Prabhu and Satyanarayan Prabhu travel all over the world, distribute Srila Prabhupada's books to university professors. And right around the time that Prabhupada left, they were in Malaysia. And Vaisesika had gone to visit a professor. And there, not knowing that Prabhupada had left the planet just that very day, he met the professor who somehow or other knew. And he heard it from him. And he was dumbfounded. It's hard to know, as I said, what to do when the spiritual master leaves. That's why Prabhupada gives instructions in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He came home, back to the motel that they were staying in as they were traveling. And he walked in the door, and his traveling partner, Satyanarayan Prabhu, was shaving at the sink. And Vaisesika said that when he opened the door, he told Satyanarayan Prabhu that Srila Prabhupada had just left the planet. And he said that as soon as Satyanarayan heard those words, he crumbled, he fell in a heap on the floor and began weeping, sobbing uncontrollably. And I remember how Vaisesika said, when I saw that, I wish that I could also cry like that. And it really struck me, the two responses to Srila Prabhupada's leaving this world. I was in New York City when Prabhupada left, living in 340 West 55th, the skyscraper building Prabhupada had purchased, and I was on Sankirtan We came home and found out when we got back to the temple, and there was kirtan all night long. The next day, the devotees were emotionally exhausted, and my godbrother Pragosh, who was my partner, where I was his partner, in going out to distribute books, came to get me and told me that today of all days, we have to go out to distribute books. That was our service. So we pulled ourselves together and we drove in our car out to the LaGuardia airport where we used to distribute books. And both of us felt stunned, and we were reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita on the way there. I didn't know how to react, and we were walking down the long hallway to where we distributed books in the airport, and I went up the escalator to where I would usually stand to meet people coming to and from flights. And as soon as I stepped onto the square, the area where I normally would distribute, I felt instantaneous connection. It was the feeling that although Srila Prabhupada has left this world, no matter what, my service will go on. When I put my foot on that floor, which was representative of the fact that I was going to keep moving forward, I felt more connected to Srila Prabhupada in that moment than I ever had before. It reminded me also of a story that another godbrother had told me, Srila Prabhu, how he had always been wanting to go on morning walks with Srila Prabhupada to get closer to him. And this was a great ambition of the devotees. Oftentimes, it was hard to get close to Prabhupada because there were leaders who needed to be close to him, and not everyone could go everywhere with him. But he got to go on a morning walk, and he was strategizing, trying to get closer and closer. And as he pushed his way forward in the group of devotees, he got to a point where he was very close to Prabhupada, walking right behind him, and Prabhupada stopped. And Srila Prabhu said that his head, or his nose, came about half an inch from the back of Srila Prabhupada's head. And in that instant, when he was looking and seeing that he was about a quarter of an inch from Srila Prabhupada's transcendental head, he thought, I'm so close, but I'm so far away. And he had a realization that it's not physical proximity that gives one this closeness. Rather, as Prabhupada points out again and again, by serving the order of the spiritual master, there is a transcendental order that the Acharya leaves behind very mercifully, which the Srimad Bhagavatam said is like a boat. And when one approaches that boat to cross over the insurmountable ocean of material existence and intends to step into the boat, then the ocean of material existence shrinks to the size of the water contained within the hoofprint of a calf. The very intention to follow the transcendental order is so powerful, and so sustaining, and so informing that those who are left behind as disciples who embrace that order never feel themselves separated from the spiritual master. Nor do the generations after the great Acharya, who find out his mood and method, and through parampara, hearing from their spiritual masters, adhere to the mood and method of the Acharya. They too are never separated. Srila Prabhupada's mood was extraordinary, He heard the crying of the people of the world, and he came running to save them at all costs. This was his motivation. It is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam that somewhere in this universe there is an ocean of tears, and it's an accumulation of the crying of every living entity. Those whose hearts are softened by the process of chanting Hare Krishna and following the footsteps of their Guru Parampara develop the sensitivity to feel the pain of other living entities. They become paradukatuki. Srila Prabhupada defined violence, the first prerequisite, or I should say, the prerequisite for advancing in spiritual life, ahimsa, very differently than many people do. He said, violence means to not distribute Krishna consciousness when you have it, and you know that other people need it. So, we've been given a very powerful mandate when Prabhupada said, kindly help me. He gave many indications of how to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, and he said, kindly help me. So anyone who has the desire to connect to Srila Prabhupada can simply take up that request as their life and soul and do something practical to come closer to help Srila Prabhupada in his mission to spread it all over the world. And also to adhere to the process of hearing and chanting very strictly, strict, serious, and sincere sadhana. And for such a person going through the various phases of his or her life, under the protection of that order, and under the protection of following what Srila Prabhupada has given, will find that even the obstacles in life become opportunities to grow, to become strong. Also, those who take up as their life and soul the process of distributing the medicine. N-A-H-I-A-S-H-O-D Maya Nashib Harolaki. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I've brought the medicine. And he wanted us to distribute it. Those who become bhaktas without borders, they become selfless in distributing that medicine to as many people as possible, will become enlivened day after day by being in the flow of that mercy that's coming down from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through Srila Prabhupada, and will see for themselves great miracles. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made no discrimination who was a fit or unfit candidate, and simply widely distributed the holy name to everyone, wherever he went. And he asked his followers to do the same thing, and Srila Prabhupada followed in the same mood. Recently, when I was in Southern California, going door to door to distribute books to people in their apartments, I came to a house in which a Gujarati couple lived, and they told me, after looking at the Bhagavatam, these are just stories. We've heard these before. We're not interested. And I went downstairs to another apartment, and I knocked on the door, and there were 4 young Muslim men, students from Bahrain, and they were smoking cigarettes and eating chicken. And they saw me at the door dressed in my dhoti, and they said, come in. And I sat down with them at the table, and I began to show them the Bhagavad Gita. and explain what it was about. I told them about the verse, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja. How if one surrenders to God, one's life becomes productive and happy. And they lit up. They thought that was the best thing they ever heard since they've come to America. And each one of them purchased a Bhagavad Gita for $20. They're very wealthy in Bahrain. And I was in that activity, feeling Prabhupada's presence, how he went door to door, how he started in such a simple way to follow the order of his spiritual master. One sheet newspaper he made. The other night, Gargamuni Prabhu was speaking in Vrindavan, and he showed one of the original newspapers that Srila Prabhupada had produced, and he held it up. It was one sheet. And then we were in Prabhupada's room, so all the books from around the world in different languages are now displayed in those beautiful cases in his room. And Gargamuni Prabhu said, how did he get from this to all this? And it's practically a miracle. Because if anyone's tried to write a book, he or she knows that it's practically impossible. Many people try to write a book, many people are still writing a book, but hardly anybody finishes a book because it's practically impossible to write a book and get it published. Very difficult. What to speak of a pamphlet or a newspaper, it's all very difficult. But Prabhupada wrote and published dozens and dozens of books, all while he was managing an international organization, and that is a miracle that happened. And the miracle happened because he adhered to the simple order of his spiritual master. And so this Tirobhav festival is an opportunity to remember the great opportunity before us, which is to find out what is the order of the Acharya, how it comes down to us through our spiritual masters, and simply to embrace it within our hearts. And even if we're not able to yet fully take advantage of that order, as Srila Prabhupada was not fully able to take advantage of the order of his spiritual master in the first part of his life. And in one lecture, Prabhupada remembers that, and therefore gives this realization to all of us. When he says that practically if you receive the order of the spiritual master, but you can't fulfill it immediately, you may pray, how can I do? How can I do? How can I do? Again and again, praying, let me please execute this order of my spiritual master. In that way, he said, all the powers of the internal potency will come to bear within the heart of such a person who develops that desire to fulfill the order of the spiritual master and to follow in the footsteps of the Acharya, and all success will be there. On this day of Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, here with all of you who have been sent by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to cover the earth with the holy names. That's why you're here, by the way. Been chosen by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to push on this inundation, which is a word Prabhupada used frequently when I was interviewing some of the devotees about the early book distribution. Yogeshwar Prabhu told me that he had translated a book into French, and he took it to Prabhupada and he showed it to him. Prabhupada looked at it on the front and back, and he said one word, inundate. So we are meant to inundate our hearts with the process of chanting Hare Krishna by giving our full attention to our chanting of japa, of the hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and then giving back to the world with compassion, the medicine that's been given to us. And in those two activities, we can attain all perfection, following this great movement established by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, authorized by the order spoken from the lotus mouth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gaur Premanande Haribol! Vancha kalpatarubhascha kripasannabhayevacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.